Hey, welcome back. Get comfortable, maybe dim those lights, because tonight we're going somewhere uncomfortable. Queen Elizabeth, the first bathed once every 3 months, maybe. And when she did, her ladies-in-waiting had to convince her it wouldn't kill her. Because Tudor royals genuinely believed water could murder you. Open your pores, let the sickness in, die by bath time. Elizabeth wasn't an exception. She was the rule. Every Tudor queen, princess and noblewoman you've admired lived in a cloud of sweat, blood, rot and denial. They wore makeup made of poison. They stuffed rags between their legs during their periods and just hoped for the best. They gave birth in rooms crawling with bacteria, while doctors refused to wash their hands. And here's the wildest part. They thought this was fine. Tonight, we're pulling back the jeweled curtains on 11 of the most stomach-turning hygiene practices that turned Tudor palaces into petri dishes and queens into walking health hazards. From the beds they slept in to the graves they rotted in. This is the truth behind the portraits. Let's start with the most obvious question. When was the last time a Tudor queen actually washed her body? Spoiler, you're really not going to like this answer. Catherine Howard stands in her chambers at Hampton Court, 1540. 19 years old, beautiful, doomed. The air thick with burning herbs and something sour no one can place. She hasn't washed her body in 2 months. Not because she's lazy, not because there's no water, but because her doctors, her advisors, and her own instincts all agree. Bathing is dangerous. In Tudor England, people believed water opened your pores. An open pores, that was a death sentence, an invitation for disease, for miasma, that bad air-carrying plague, for evil humours to seep into your blood and rot you from within. Medical texts of the era warned explicitly against bathing. One physician wrote that water penetrates the body and makes it receptive to evil airs. Another claimed that too much washing weakens the natural humours and invites pestilence. So they avoided it, aggressively. Elizabeth would later boast that she bathed once every 3 months, whether she needed it or not. That wasn't a joke. That was her being hygienic by Tudor standards, a model of cleanliness. She was proud of this. She told ambassadors, she mentioned it in letters. When she did bathe, it was a full royal production. Servants hauled buckets of water up multiple flights of stairs, heated them over fires in the kitchen, filled a wooden tub lined with linen sheets to prevent splinters. Rose petals were scattered on the surface. Herbs burned in the corner to purify the air. Elizabeth would lower herself in, fully clothed in a linen shift, because nudity, even alone, was vulgar and potentially sinful, and soak for maybe 20 minutes while her ladies stood guard outside the door. The water was never very hot, lukewarm at best, because hot water was believed to be especially dangerous. It opened pores even wider. Then she'd step out, pat herself dry with linen cloths, dress in fresh clothes, and not do it again for another season. But even that was considered excessive by some. Many royal women bathed twice a year, once before their wedding, once before childbirth, some never at all. Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, was raised in Spain, where bathing was slightly more common due to Moorish influence. When she arrived in England, she was shocked by how rarely the English bathed. In letters to her family, she complained about the smell of the English court, but she quickly adapted. Within a few years, she too was bathing only a few times a year. Anne Boleyn, despite her French sophistication, also bathed rarely. Contemporary accounts mention her using rose water to wipe her face and hands, but full-body bathing, almost never. Here's what that means in practice. Sweat accumulated in layers. You're wearing gowns made of velvet, brocade, wool, multiple layers, a linen chemise against your skin, then a kirtle, a fitted undergown, then the gown itself, often lined with silk, then sleeves, attached separately with pins, then a stomacher, a stiffened panel, then a ruff around your neck, then a farthingale, if you're fashionable, a structured underskirt. No ventilation, no breathability. just fabric trapping heat, moisture, every bodily secretion. Your scalp itches constantly. The oil builds up, making your hair hang limp and greasy. Your underarms reek a sharp, acrid smell that permeates your chemise. Your thighs chafe raw from walking, the skin rubbing together with no barrier. Your feet, trapped in tight leather slippers, with no socks, are damp and blistered. And you just keep going. Instead of bathing, they wipe down. With linen cloths, dry ones mostly, they dabbed at their faces, careful not to disturb their makeup. Under their arms, just the surface, not thoroughly. Between their legs, quickly, perfunctorily, embarrassed even alone. But no soap. Soap was harsh. Soap was for laundry, for scrubbing floors, not for delicate royal skin. Some physicians even warned that soap could strip away the body's natural, protective oils, leaving you vulnerable to disease. So the grime layered. Day after day, week after week, month after month, sweat accumulated in the folds of skin. Dead skin cells mixed with sebum and formed a paste in creases. Menstrual blood dried and flaked. Food particles, because they ate with their hands, got wiped on clothes and skin. All of it accumulating. Under breasts, especially for women who'd nursed children, the skin stayed damp. Perfect breeding ground for fungal infections. Between toes, the same. In the folds around their necks, where those massive ruffs rubbed constantly, the skin became raw, then infected, then scarred. The smell was overpowering. Not just body odour, though that was intense, but layers of smell. Old sweat mixed with fresh sweat. The sour tang of unwashed scalp. The metallic hint of menstrual blood. The mustiness of clothes worn too long. The yeasty smell of fungal infections, which is why they doused themselves in perfume. Rose water, made by steeping rose petals in water or alcohol. Lavender oil, musk, a secretion from musk deer. Civet, from the anal glands of civet cats. Ambergris, a waxy substance found in whale intestines. Not to smell good, but to create a competing scent strong enough to overpower their natural stench. They'd splash rose water on their faces, necks, wrists, dab musk behind their ears, rub civet on their chest. The scents would clash. Floral meeting animalistic meeting oceanic, creating something overwhelming. But here's the thing, they knew they smelled. Letters and diaries from the period mention it. One lady-in-waiting wrote about having to stand close to the Queen during a summer ceremony, and how she breathed through her mouth to endure it. They just believed the alternative, regular bathing, was suicide. Medical texts supported this belief. One popular guide warned that excessive bathing opens the body to evil vapours and causes the skin to soften, making it receptive to plague. Another claimed that water washes away the natural oils that God provides for our protection. Even when plague outbreaks happened, the recommended prevention wasn't bathing. It was sealing yourself in rooms with windows closed, breathing through herb-filled masks, and avoiding water at all costs. So they lived in their own filth, proudly, regally, convinced they were protecting themselves. And that accumulated grime, about to meet something even worse. Once a month, Tudor women faced something no history book mentions, something that made the not bathing look almost manageable. A lady-in-waiting to Anne Boleyn stands in Greenwich Palace, 1535. The court is preparing for a feast, and her period just started. She has nothing, no pads, no tampons, no cups, no pain medication, not even a basic understanding of what's happening inside her body. Because anatomy is witchcraft, and the womb is a wandering mystery governed by the moon, bad humours, and God's displeasure with Eve. So she does what every woman does, folds up strips of linen, old, worn, rough fabric, often repurposed from chemises too damaged to wear, or sheets too stained to use. Bunches them between her legs, tucks them into her undergarments, if she's even wearing any. The linen is scratchy. It doesn't have the soft, absorbent texture of modern materials. It's just cloth, and it shifts, constantly. Then she goes about her day, in a gown that weighs 20 pounds, standing for hours at court, dancing, kneeling in chapel for prayers that last an hour or more, walking through drafty corridors, climbing stairs, all while clenching her thighs and praying the rags don't shift. They always shift. She feels it happen. The fabric bunching, moving, no longer positioned correctly. Blood starts to seep around the edges, warm, wet, spreading across her inner thighs. Blood soaks through the linen. The fabric becomes saturated within hours. Then it drips down her legs. She feels it trickling, cooling as it goes. By the time it reaches her ankles, it's cold and sticky. And if she's at a feast or in the king's presence, she can't leave, just stands there, smiling, laughing at jokes she doesn't find funny, pretending she can't feel the blood pooling in her shoe, because talking about it? Unthinkable. Menstruation was shameful, unclean, the curse of Eve, the mark of woman's sin. You didn't complain, you didn't ask for help, you definitely didn't excuse yourself mid-function. You bled quietly and hoped no one noticed, the dark stains spreading on your gown. Now here's where it gets truly grotesque. Those rags, not washed properly, no detergent, no hot water on demand, no understanding of bacteria. Women would rinse them. Maybe. In cold water. Because heating water was labour-intensive and expensive. You had to carry it, heat it over a fire in small batches. So cold water, a quick swish, maybe some scrubbing. Then they'd hang them somewhere to dry, in a damp corner of the chamber where the air never fully circulated, or in a shared laundry area where they'd hang next to everyone else's menstrual rags. The rags stayed damp, because stone palaces were cold, air circulation was poor, so they mildewed. They developed that distinctive sour smell of fabric that never quite dries. They bred bacteria, Staphylococcus, E. coli, all the usual suspects that thrive in blood-soaked fabric kept in damp conditions. And then, next month, she'd use them again, taking those damp, possibly mouldy rags and pressing them directly against the most vulnerable part of her body. The infections were inevitable: bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections, urinary tract infections. Women developed rashes, angry red patches, sores, open, weeping lesions where the rough fabric rubbed skin raw, foul-smelling discharge that women accepted as normal. There was no concept of changing the rags regularly throughout the day. You put them in place in the morning. They stayed until evening, or longer, so women would go an entire day with the same saturated rags. The blood would congeal, the fabric would stiffen, the smell would intensify, that distinctive coppery scent mixed with the sour smell of unwashed body. But wait, it gets worse. Some women used moss when linen wasn't available. Sphagnum moss, which at least had some absorbent properties, but it was scratchy, left particles behind. Others used wool, slightly more absorbent than linen but rougher, and wool when wet smells like wet sheep mixed with blood. Some women, especially poorer women who couldn't afford to dedicate fabric to menstrual use, just bled freely into their clothes. They'd wear dark-coloured skirts that wouldn't show stains as obviously. They'd limit their movements. They'd just endure. But the worst part wasn't the physical discomfort, it was the shame, the isolation. Women were told their periods made them toxic, that menstrual blood could sour wine just by being in the same room, wilt flowers, kill crops if a menstruating woman walked through a field, make meat go rotten, turn milk sour. They weren't supposed to cook during their periods, weren't supposed to touch holy objects. Some religious texts suggested they shouldn't even enter churches. They were considered unclean, dangerous, contaminated. One documented case from 1540, a lady in waiting to Catherine Howard bled so heavily during a Christmas feast that she fainted. When servants carried her out, there was a trail of blood on the floor. The official story: a servant had spilled wine. The lady in waiting never returned to court, dismissed quietly. Her reputation ruined by the crime of having a uterus that worked too well. This was life for every woman, every month, for decades, from their first period to menopause. with no solutions, no improvements, no acknowledgement, just blood, shame and silence. And speaking of things they couldn't talk about, their mouths were literally rotting. The smell hits you before you see her smile. Anne of Cleves sits across from you at a banquet in 1540, fourth wife of Henry VIII. German princess, political pawn. When she smiles during the meal, you understand why Henry wanted an annulment. Her gums are black, not stained black, necrotic, rotting from the inside. Her teeth? Some are brown, the enamel stained and pitted. Others are missing entirely, just gaps in her smile. The ones remaining are jagged, broken, cracked. Several are loose, you can see them wobble slightly when she speaks. And she's not unusual. This is what noble teeth looked like, because sugar had just become fashionable. It was imported from the Caribbean and Mediterranean at enormous cost. A pound of sugar could cost more than a servant's monthly wages, so only the wealthy could afford it. And they went absolutely wild. Subtleties, elaborate sugar sculptures depicting castles, animals, entire battle scenes. Marchpane, basically marzipan, almond paste loaded with sugar. Candied fruits, crystallized in so much sugar, they were basically pure sweetness. Sweetmeats, sugar plate. Desserts so sugary, they'd send a modern dentist into cardiac arrest. Queen Elizabeth I was obsessed. Foreign ambassadors noted it in their reports home. One Venetian envoy wrote that the Queen's teeth are very black, a defect the English seem subject to, from their too great use of sugar. By her 30s, her teeth were black. She was so self-conscious, she stuffed cloth into her cheeks to hide the gaps when she spoke in public, to create the illusion of a full mouth, to hide the hollows where teeth used to be. By her 60s, almost no teeth left, just rotting stumps and empty sockets. Paul Hentzner, a German traveller, described meeting the elderly Elizabeth. Her face oblong, fair but wrinkled, her eyes small, yet black and pleasant, her teeth black, a defect the English seem subject to from their too great use of sugar. Black. Not missing, though some were, black, rotted, necrotic, and the pain constant, the kind of deep, throbbing agony that never goes away, that wakes you at night, that makes eating torture. But dental care was experimental at best. If you had a toothache, you visited a barber-surgeon. Yes, the same guy who cut your hair also pulled teeth and performed bloodletting, and maybe removed simple tumours. He'd have you sit in a wooden chair, maybe drink some wine first for pain relief. Then he'd take a pair of pliers, crude iron instruments, not sterilised, probably used on someone else that morning, and wrench your molar out. No anaesthesia, no numbing, just raw, screaming agony as he twisted and pulled. Sometimes the tooth came out cleanly, sometimes it broke, leaving pieces behind, sharp fragments embedded in your gum, which would become infected, requiring another extraction. Or you tried home remedies, rubbing your gums with sage, rinsing with vinegar, which actually made things worse, the acid eroding what little enamel remained, pressing a hot iron to your jaw to burn out the pain. Some women used metal toothpicks, jabbed them into their gums until they bled, thinking it would release bad humours. Instead, it just caused infections. Others scrubbed with abrasive powders, crushed brick, charcoal, ground bones. It scraped away stains, sure, but also enamel, leaving teeth porous, sensitive, destroyed. And if an infection set in, real danger. Abscesses formed, pockets of pus in the gum or jawbone. They'd swell your face, make eating impossible. The infection could spread to your jaw, your blood, your brain. More than one noble woman died from an infected tooth, not in battle, not in childbirth, from a toothache. But here's the most disturbing part. Bad teeth were almost a badge of honour, because if your teeth were rotting, it meant you could afford sugar. It meant you were wealthy enough to destroy your own body with luxury. Poor people's teeth were actually better. They ate coarse bread, vegetables, some meat, no sugar. Their teeth wore down, but they didn't rot like noble teeth. So there was this perverse situation where blackened gums and missing molars were almost fashionable. Some people even blackened their teeth intentionally, using mixtures of soot or charcoal to stain healthy teeth black, to pretend they could afford enough sugar to rot their teeth. Tudor royal women smiled with blackened gums and broken teeth, smiled through pain, proud of the decay, because suffering was fashion, and fashion about to become literally poisonous. Morning light filters through Catherine Parr's chamber windows. Summer, 1546. London is hot and humid. She sits at her dressing table while her ladies prepare her face for the day. What they're about to do is insane. First, they mix Venetian ceruse. The name sounds elegant, exotic, sophisticated. It's lead, white lead carbonate ground into fine powder and mixed with vinegar to create thick, paint-like paste. The mixture has to be made fresh regularly because it separates, the lead settling to the bottom. So her ladies stir it. Then they take a brush made from animal hair and begin painting her face. They start at her hairline. Brush the thick white paste down over her forehead, over her eyebrows, which she's plucked almost completely away, down her nose, across her cheeks, over her lips, down her neck, across her chest down to where her gown begins. The goal? Pale porcelain skin, ghostly, ethereal, because pale skin meant wealth. Tan skin was for peasants, for people who didn't matter. So she paints herself white, not just pale, white, corpse white, unnaturally, obviously painted white, every single day. The lead paste is thick, heavy, pulling. It tightens as it dries, cracks when she smiles or speaks, creates little fissures in the white mask, so she has to reapply throughout the day, touching up the cracks, maintaining the illusion. But here's what that lead does, though she doesn't know it: seeping into pores, absorbing through skin, entering bloodstream, slowly, systematically poisoning her. At first she looks flawless, smooth, ethereal. Foreign ambassadors compliment her complexion. Other ladies envy her perfect pallor. But over time, months, years, the lead destroys her skin, dries it out, makes it crack and flake, which makes her look worse, so she applies more makeup to cover the damage, thicker layers, more lead, which makes the damage worse, which makes her apply even more. A cycle, a toxic, deadly cycle. Women who wore Ceres for years developed grey, leathery skin. The lead killed skin cells, leaving behind something that looked more like hide than human skin. Hair loss. The lead poisoned follicles. Women's hair would thin, become brittle, fall out in clumps, tremors. The lead affected their nervous systems. Their hands would shake. Start subtle, just a slight tremor picking up a cup. Eventually, becoming severe enough they couldn't write, couldn't sew, couldn't control their movements. Cognitive decline, confusion, memory problems, difficulty concentrating. Lead poisoning affects the brain, killing neurons, disrupting neural pathways. Some went mad, experiencing hallucinations, paranoia, rage, the lead slowly destroying their minds while they painted it on every morning. Some went blind, the lead damaging optic nerves. Many died young, organs quietly shutting down, kidneys failing, liver failing, heart giving out. But the ceruse was just the beginning. Rouge, the red powder for cheeks and lips, was made from mercury, specifically vermilion, a bright, gorgeous red pigment made from cinnabar mercury sulfide ore. The colour was stunning, vivid, vibrant, worth more than gold by weight, and deadly. Mercury poisoning causes tremors, mood swings, memory loss, insomnia, irritability, organ failure. The mercury would absorb through skin, enter bloodstream, accumulate in tissues. Then there was belladonna, nightshade, a deadly poisonous plant. Women would extract the juice, crushing berries, straining out liquid, then use a dropper to put it in their eyes. Why? To dilate pupils. Because large dark pupils were considered seductive. It worked. Belladonna contains atropine, which paralyzes the muscles controlling pupil size. Your pupils dilate and can't contract. Side effects: blurred vision, sensitivity to light, headaches, confusion, and potential blindness if you use too much. But beauty was pain. And the eyebrows? Thick eyebrows were unfashionable. The ideal was a high, bare forehead with barely any eyebrows, so women plucked them. Completely. Every hair. Using metal tweezers, they'd sit for hours, pulling out every eyebrow hair one by one. But plucking was painful and time-consuming, and the hair kept growing back. So some used caustic substances: quicklime, calcium oxide, highly alkaline, vinegar mixed with sulfur, mixtures of urine and lye. They'd rub these on their eyebrow area. It would burn, intense, searing pain. The skin would redden, then blister, then scar. The scarring prevented hair growth. Mission accomplished, except now they had burned scarred skin, which they covered with more white lead, which made the scars worse. Some women even shaved their hairline back. To create a higher forehead, they'd shave it back an inch or more, then use the same caustic substances to prevent regrowth. Picture this: a Tudor queen preparing for a diplomatic meeting, face coated in lead, thick enough to crack when she smiles, cheeks dusted with mercury-based rouge, lips painted the same deadly red. Eyes have belladonna drops, making everything blurred. Eyebrows gone, plucked or burned away. Hairline shaved and scarred. She smiles graciously as ambassadors compliment her beauty, while internally her body screams. Skin burning under the lead, eyes watering from belladonna, scarred hairline itching. Meanwhile, her skin is rotting, her brain slowly poisoning itself, her organs accumulating toxic metals, her vision deteriorating. In 20 years she'll be dead. Not from plague, not from childbirth, not from political intrigue, from vanity, from fashion. But she doesn't know that yet. She just knows she looks perfect, pale, pristine, beautiful by the standards of her time. And that beautiful face had to smile through something even more humiliating than lead poisoning. 3 hours into a feast at Greenwich Palace, 1530, hundreds of people packed into the Great Hall. You've been eating for hours, your stomach cramps, nature calls, loudly. What do? No bathroom, no private stall, no plumbing, no flush toilets. Option 1, leave the hall. Walk several corridors to the nearest garderobe, a small room with a wooden seat over a shaft, dropping waste into a cesspit or moat below. Sounds fine? It's not. Garderobes are disgusting. Dark, no windows, maybe a small slit for ventilation. Cold, freezing in winter because that slit lets in wind. Sweltering in summer because they're small. Enclosed spaces, and the smell. Overwhelming, overpowering. The kind of stench that hits like a physical force when you open the door. Human waste, urine, feces, accumulated filth from hundreds of uses. Sometimes animals fall down the shaft and die. Their decomposing bodies add to the aroma. Sometimes the shaft gets blocked. Waste backs up. The wooden seat becomes contaminated. The smell becomes apocalyptic. And if multiple people used it that day, the seat is damp, wet with other people's urine. They're waste. You have to hike up layers of gown and petticoats, balance over this damp wooden hole, and hope you don't slip. Oh, and there's no toilet paper. That hasn't been invented yet. So you wipe with whatever's available. Hay, straw, rags, leaves if someone bothered to collect them. Moss if you're lucky. You wipe yourself with scratchy, rough materials. They don't clean well. They chafe. They leave residue. Sometimes there's nothing available, so you use your hand. Then wipe your hand on your skirt. Or you just don't wipe. Pull your clothes back up and deal with it. Getting to the garderobe means leaving the feast, which means everyone notices. They know where you're going, what you're doing. Humiliating. So many choose option 2, the chamber pot. You catch your lady-in-waiting's eye, make a small gesture. She understands immediately, slips out of the hall, retrieves a chamber pot, brings it back. Where do you use it? Right there. Maybe just outside the hall behind a tapestry, or in a shadowy corner, Or sometimes if you're desperate and your gown is full enough, right at the table, your massive gown provides cover. All those layers of fabric, you hike them up slightly. Your lady holds the pot in position. You crouch slightly, and you relieve yourself, while the feast continues, while people talk and laugh, while musicians play. The sound is muffled by your skirts, but the smell isn't. Urine has a distinctive sharp scent. When you're done, your lady carries the pot away, empties it. Where? Out a window usually. Just opens a window and tosses the contents into the courtyard below. This wasn't occasional. This was normal. This was how royalty functioned. Anne Boleyn had a chamber pot lined with velvet, red velvet, because if you're peeing in a bucket, at least make it fancy. Elizabeth I had multiple chamber pots, some upholstered in crimson fabric, some with cushioned seats, some portable enough to travel with her. Henry VIII had an elaborate, close stool, a box with a padded seat covering a chamber pot. His was covered in black velvet with gold trim, but those pots weren't cleaned properly. Servants rinsed them with cold water, maybe splashed some vinegar, no soap, no hot water, no disinfectant. So the pots stayed perpetually grimy, stained, reeking of ammonia. Old urine crystallizes into ammonia salts, and they were kept in bedrooms, often right out in the open, or under the bed, filling the air with that sharp nose-burning stench. Some people emptied their own pots, just opened their windows and dumped the contents into the street below, which meant walking through Tudor cities was hazardous. People would shout "Garde à l'eau," corrupted French for "watch out for the water," before dumping. But not everyone bothered to shout. So you'd be walking along and suddenly get splashed with someone's urine from above. The streets were rivers of waste, human waste, animal waste. Horses, dogs, pigs roamed freely. Butcher refuse, entrails, blood, unwanted parts thrown into gutters. But even worse than the streets were the guardrobes themselves. Because those waste shafts had to empty somewhere. They emptied into cesspits, large underground pits. The waste just accumulated, composting slowly, creating methane gas, sometimes exploding if someone got too close with a flame. Or they emptied into moats, the moats surrounding castles. Hampton Court Palace, the garderobes emptied into the moat. Dozens of toilets, all dropping waste into the same water surrounding the building. Wait, here's the detail that'll haunt you. At Hampton Court, they served eels at feasts. Eels caught in the moat, the same moat where the garderobes emptied. Yes, Tudor royalty was eating fish that fed on literal shit from their toilets. Outbreaks of dysentery were constant, typhoid fever, cholera during bad years. Because people lived on top of their own sewage, the cesspits would overflow, seep into groundwater, contaminate wells, the same wells people drank from. For Tudor royal women, dignity and waste management were in constant battle, and waste was winning. But at least waste could eventually be disposed of. What couldn't be disposed of was what was living on them. Every Tudor queen was a walking ecosystem. Lice, fleas, bedbugs, mites. Every royal woman hosted entire colonies. Start with the hair. Tudor noblewomen wore it long. Sign of femininity, virtue. Also a breeding ground, because they didn't wash it. Maybe once a month if they were fastidious. When they did, it was with lye soap. Harsh, caustic soap made from wood ash and animal fat. So their scalps were perpetually oily, the sebaceous glands working overtime. Oil accumulated, mixed with dead skin cells, perfect environment. Head lice were universal. Not just common, universal. Every person had them. The lice would lay eggs, nits, attaching them to hair shafts with a glue-like secretion. Hundreds of them. Each female louse could lay 6 to 10 eggs per day. The eggs hatched in about a week. The nymphs matured in another week, then started laying their own eggs. Exponential growth. A few lice became dozens, became hundreds. Women had special fine-toothed metal combs. The teeth were so close together that when you dragged the comb through hair, it would catch the lice and nits. This was a daily ritual, combing through hair section by section. The comb would catch lice. You'd wipe them on a cloth, watch them crawl, crush them between your thumbnails. They'd make a distinctive popping sound. But it never worked. While you were combing, the lice were breeding. And everyone around you also had lice. Court was basically a lice exchange program. The itching was maddening, constant. Many women scratched until they bled, created open sores on their scalps, which then got infected, forming crusty, weeping lesions. Some tried remedies, mercury ointments. They'd rub mercury-based salves into their scalps. It killed some lice also, poisoned them, caused hair loss. Others used wormwood, a bitter herb, made it into a paste. It helped slightly. Some women gave up entirely, shaved their heads, wore wigs. Elizabeth I famously wore wigs in her later years. Those elaborate, towering red wigs that became iconic. But they started as a solution to lice. Here's the grim irony. The wigs also had lice, because wigs were made from real human hair, often purchased from poor women, or cut from corpses. The hair was cleaned supposedly, but cleaning methods were inadequate. The lice and nits survived, or new lice colonized the wigs quickly, because wigs were never washed between wearings. They were brushed, powdered with starch, perfumed, never washed. So Elizabeth's iconic red wigs, probably crawling with lice. She probably still itched constantly. Just now, under a wig. But lice weren't the worst problem. Fleas were everywhere. Tudor floors were covered with rushes, dried grass and reeds scattered on stone or wooden floors. The rushes absorbed spills, added insulation. But they weren't changed often enough. Sometimes they'd stay down for months, a year or more. Beneath the top layer accumulated everything that had fallen through: spilled food, vomit from drunken courtiers, urine from dogs, bones from meals, crumbs, and fleas. Thousands of fleas, living in the rushes, breeding, thriving. They'd jump onto anyone who walked by, latch onto ankles, legs, crawl up under clothing, bite anywhere they could reach. The bites were small, but intensely itchy. Red welts. In clusters. Fleas don't bite just once. Noble women wore flea furs, strips of fur or velvet worn around the neck, wrists. The theory was that fleas preferred fur, would jump onto the fur, get trapped. Then you could shake the fur out. Or burn it. Did it work? Marginally. Maybe caught a few fleas. Not enough. Catherine of Aragon complained about fleas in letters to her family, described how English homes were infested, how the itching was constant. Fleas also lived in bedding, in straw-stuffed mattresses, in wool blankets. They'd emerge at night, attracted to body heat and carbon dioxide from breathing. Bite while you slept. You'd wake with fresh bites, sometimes dozens from a single night. And then there were bed bugs, the worst of all. Tudor beds were wooden frames with rope supports. On top, a mattress stuffed with straw, wool or feathers, if you were wealthy. Perfect bedbug habitat. Cracks in the wood frame. Spaces between the ropes. The seams of the mattress. Bedbugs are nearly invisible. Small, flat, reddish-brown. They hide during the day, come out at night, feed on blood for 5 to 10 minutes, then retreat. Their bites are similar to flea bites, but often in lines. Breakfast, lunch and dinner. 3 bites in a row where the bug fed, moved slightly, fed again. The itching is intense, worse than flea bites. The welts can last for weeks, and there was no way to get rid of them. You couldn't wash a mattress. You couldn't spray pesticide. Some people tried pulling beds apart, pouring boiling water over wooden frames. It killed some bugs, but not the eggs, and not the bugs hiding deep in the mattress stuffing. The only real solution was to burn everything. The entire bed. Most people couldn't afford that, so they just lived with it. Woke up every morning covered in fresh bites, went to bed knowing they'd be bitten again. The constant scratching led to infections, broken skin, open sores. Bacteria entered. The sores would become infected, fill with pus. Without antibiotics, they festered, spread. Some women developed cellulitis, some developed sepsis. More than one person died from an infected bug bite. Royal women wore long sleeves year-round, high necklines, partly for modesty, partly to hide the bites, the scratches, the scabs, the scars, because admitting you were covered in bug bites? Unthinkable. Everyone was itching, but no one talked about it. So they wore layers, powdered their visible skin to hide redness, perfumed themselves, and they smiled, curtsied, pretended their skin wasn't crawling, which was challenging considering what they were wearing under those gowns, or more accurately, what they weren't wearing. Tudor noblewomen wore no underwear, none, zero. Pull on a chemise in the morning, a long linen shift to your knees, long sleeves, simple construction, that's it. The only thing between your body and your clothes, no panties, no bra, no underpants of any kind. The chemise was meant to protect your expensive outer clothes from your body. Not the other way around. When you sweat, and you sweat constantly, it soaks into the chemise. When you menstruate, the blood soaks into the chemise. When you sit, your bare bottom is against the chemise. And that chemise, not washed daily, not washed weekly, not even washed monthly in many cases. You wore it for days, weeks, until it was visibly filthy or smelled so bad you couldn't stand it. Then maybe you'd swap it for another, if you owned multiple chemises, if you had time to do laundry. Many women owned only 2 or 3 chemises, one to wear, one that was drying after a half-hearted wash, maybe one as a spare, so the smell, the build-up, the bacteria, all trapped against your skin. The fabric would stiffen with dried sweat, feel crusty, the armpits would yellow, the hem would darken with dirt, the crotch area would stain with menstrual blood and urine. At court, summer, hot, the Great Hall has hundreds of people. No air conditioning, no fans, just bodies and fireplaces and thick stone walls trapping heat. You're wearing that chemise, then over it, a kirtle. Then your gown, heavy fabric, often multiple layers. Then sleeves, separate pieces pinned on. Then a stomacher. Then a ruff. Then a farthingale if you're fashionable. No ventilation. No breathability. You're sweating. Profusely. Under your arms, the sweat soaking through, pooling. Under your breasts, the sweat trapped, the skin staying damp. Between your legs, sweat and friction and moisture. Your underarms start to chafe, the skin rubbing against itself with every movement. It becomes raw, red. Then it breaks open. Small fissures, they burn. Every time you move your arms, it stings. Your thighs rub together when you walk. The inner thighs become raw, the skin literally rubbing away. By the end of the day, it hurts to walk. You develop a rash, angry red patches, where fabric rubbed. Where sweat accumulated, it itches, burns, stings, all at once. But you can't scratch, not in public. So you just stand there, smiling while your skin screams. The smell. Body odour in Tudor times was on another level. Everyone stank. But women, layered in all that fabric, unable to bathe, bleeding into rags, they stank worse. The sweat itself smells. But old sweat smells worse. And sweat trapped in fabric for days or weeks. That's bacterial decomposition. The bacteria breaking down proteins in sweat, creating compounds like butyric acid, the same chemical that makes vomit smell. So by the end of the day, you smell like a combination of sweat, old blood, stale urine, and vomit, which is why they drench themselves in perfume. Not a dab, drench themselves. Rose water splashed on liberally, musk rubbed on thickly, civet applied to pulse points. The goal wasn't to smell good. The goal was to create such an overpowering scent that it drowned out the underlying stench. They also carried posies, small bouquets of flowers and herbs, held to the nose when the smell, from yourself or others, got too bad. Now let's talk about support, or lack thereof. Modern bras lift and separate, provide support, distribute weight. Tudor women had none of that. Breasts just hung, heavy, unsupported, pulling on the back and shoulders. For women with large breasts, this was agony, constant pulling, the weight creating tension in the upper back. the shoulders rounding forward, neck pain from the postural changes, the skin under the breasts stayed damp. Sweat accumulated, couldn't evaporate. The moisture and friction led to intertrigo, a rash that develops in skin folds, red, raw, sometimes breaking open, getting infected. Some women wore breast girdles, tight bands of fabric wrapped around the chest. But these weren't for support, they were for suppression, to flatten breasts, make them less prominent, because visible breasts were considered immodest, sexual, sinful. So they bound them, wrapped tight fabric around and around until the breasts were compressed, flattened against the chest. This was uncomfortable. The fabric dug in, restricted breathing, made the skin beneath hot and sweaty. At night, they'd remove the binding. The sudden release caused pain, blood rushing back into compressed tissue. The breasts would ache, throb, then they'd sleep in the same chemise they'd worn all day, or sometimes nothing. In beds with no sheets, just a wool blanket over straw. In rooms with no heat in winter, or in summer, no ventilation. Their bodies trapped in fabric during the day, exposed to extremes at night. And they wore the same clothes for months, the same gowns, the same kirtles. They'd air them out, hang them in windows, brush them to remove visible dirt, spot clean stains with vinegar, or, and this is going to sound insane, stale urine. Urine contains ammonia. When urine ages, it becomes more alkaline. The ammonia breaks down certain stains. Blood, grass, wine. They'd dab it on stains with a cloth. Let it sit, wipe it off. Your clothes now smelled like old piss, but that was considered preferable to visible stains. But they didn't wash the garments, not fully, because washing meant disassembling them. It took days, sometimes weeks for elaborate gowns. So clothes accumulated layers of filth, sweat, spilled food, splashed wine, body oils. The fabric stiffened, darkened, smelled, but changing clothes too often was considered vain, wasteful, suspicious. So they wore their filth, day after day, month after month, until the fabric literally fell apart. Because suffering in silence was virtue, and cleanliness was weakness. And all that accumulated filth was about to meet the single, most dangerous moment in a Tudor woman's life. October 12th, 1537. Jane Seymour lies in her birthing chamber after hours of labour. She's just given birth to Edward VI, the son, the heir. The entire kingdom is celebrating. Bells ringing, bonfires lit. She should be celebrating too. Instead, she's terrified because something feels wrong. She's been confined here for weeks, since the beginning of her 9th month. The room is dark, airless, windows sealed tight with heavy curtains. Because fresh air was believed to harm new mothers and babies. The theory was that air carried disease. Miasma, bad air, could enter through open pores and make you sick. So rooms were sealed, windows covered, curtains drawn. The air grew stale, stuffy, suffocating. She's lying on the birthing bed. The sheets are soaked with blood and amniotic fluid. Her body covered in sweat. The room is hot, multiple braziers burning, keeping the temperature high. The smell is overwhelming. Blood, sweat, fear, and beneath it all something else, something organic and wrong. The midwives are bustling around. They've delivered dozens of babies. They know what they're doing. They're competent, experienced, but their hands are filthy. Under their nails, dirt, blood from previous births, possibly from earlier that day. Fecal matter because they used the guardrobe without washing after. Their clothes are stained, aprons covered in blood and fluids from previous births. Some fresh, some dried, some weeks old. They didn't wash their hands before attending her. The concept doesn't exist. They wiped their hands on their aprons, maybe rinsed them in a basin of cold water. That's it. During labour they reached inside her, repeatedly, to check dilation, to feel the baby's position, to guide the baby during delivery. Each time they introduced bacteria, directly into her uterus, into her birth canal. The bacteria came from their hands, from their clothes, from the environment, Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, E. coli. The baby was born. She heard him cry, a good sign. The midwives quickly cut the umbilical cord with scissors that weren't sterilised. That had been used before. They tied off the cord, took the baby away to be cleaned and swaddled. But the placenta hasn't come out yet. It should have. Within 30 minutes is normal, but it's stuck. So the midwives reach in again, manually. Their hands inside her, grabbing, pulling, trying to extract the placenta. It comes out. Finally. But in pieces, fragments stay behind. Lodged in her uterus. The midwives don't know, can't tell. Those fragments will start to rot, decay, become a breeding ground for bacteria. She tore during delivery. The midwives stitch her up, with thread that hasn't been sterilised. Using needles that were used on another woman yesterday. The stitches are crude, functional but not precise. Then she's left to recover. In the same bed, with the same bloody sheets, in the same stuffy, airless room. No one changes the sheets. Blood and fluids dry on the fabric beneath her. The room stays sealed, no fresh air. The braziers keep burning, keeping it hot. Within hours she develops a fever. Low at first, she feels warm, a bit flushed. The midwives say it's normal. New mothers often run warm, but by the next day, the fever spikes. She's burning up, shaking with chills even though she's hot. This is childbed fever, puerperal sepsis, a bacterial infection of the uterus spreading into the bloodstream. The fragments of placenta left inside her are decomposing, rotting. The bacteria are multiplying exponentially, producing toxins, entering her bloodstream. Her abdomen swells, becomes tender, painful to touch. The skin feels hot, and the smell. Even through the layers of blankets, even through the perfumes the ladies are burning. Sweet, putrid, rotten. The distinctive smell of necrotic tissue. The infection is spreading. Through her uterus, into her abdominal cavity, into her blood. Doctors are called. They try bloodletting, cutting her arm to drain bad humours. It weakens her further. They try purging, giving her emetics to make her vomit, and laxatives to make her diarrhea. It just dehydrates her. They try prayer, lots of prayer. Priests at her bedside, holy water, relics. None of it helps because prayer doesn't kill bacteria. Her temperature continues to spike. She's sweating through her chemise, shaking uncontrollably, confused. Her brain is being affected, either by the fever directly or by toxins from the infection. Her organs start failing. Kidneys first. Her urine becomes dark, then stops entirely. Liver next. Her skin takes on a yellowish tint. Her heart is racing, trying to compensate, but it can't keep up. 12 days after giving birth, she dies. Not from the birth itself, from the infection that followed, from hands that were never washed, from tools that were never cleaned, from a room that was never aired. She was 28 years old. Jane Seymour wasn't unique. She wasn't unlucky. She was typical. Catherine Parr, the queen who survived Henry VIII, remarried after his death, got pregnant, gave birth to a daughter, and died 6 days later of childbed fever. She was 36. Catherine of Aragon had 6 pregnancies. Only 1 child survived past infancy. One study of Tudor and Stuart aristocratic women found that approximately 1 in 40 died in childbirth. That's 2.5%, and that's just immediate death. It doesn't count the infections afterward. For every woman who gave birth, there was a real significant chance she wouldn't survive. So women approaching childbirth would write their wills, say goodbye to their other children, make arrangements, put their affairs in order. Then they'd enter that sealed room, lie in that bed, hope and pray, and too many never left. All because no one washed their hands. The solution was so simple. Soap, water, clean hands, clean tools, fresh air. But they didn't know. So women kept dying. And if they survived childbirth, they still had to eat, which was just another opportunity for poisoning. The Great Hall is packed. Tables loaded with roasted meats, pies, sugared fruits, jellies, bread. It looks impressive, abundant. But let's trace where that food came from. The kitchen is located far from the dining hall, sometimes in a completely separate building. Fire risk. Kitchens had open flames, hot ovens, grease fires, which means your food is cooked, then carried. Across courtyards, through corridors, upstairs, downstairs, sometimes several hundred yards. By the time it reaches you, cold or lukewarm, and touched by many hands, the cooks who prepared it, unwashed. They've been working in a hot kitchen all day, sweating, wiping their faces with their hands, then touching the food. The servants who carried it, also unwashed, possibly sick. One has a cold, another has an infected cut on his hand. Let's talk about the meat itself. No refrigeration, so meat was slaughtered, butchered, and either cooked immediately or preserved. Preservation, salting, smoking, or just hanging it in a cool cellar and hoping. But cellars weren't always cool enough, especially in summer. So, meat would start to spoil. The smell would change, the texture would get slimy. Did they throw it away? No, too expensive. They masked it. Tudor recipes are loaded with spices, not just for flavour, to cover the taste of meat that's gone off. Your venison tastes funky. Add cloves, cinnamon, ginger, pepper. Lots of it. Problem solved, right? Except you're eating spoiled meat. Food poisoning was constant. Everyone experienced it regularly. Stomach cramps, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Sometimes mild, sometimes severe. Days of agony. Some people died from it. The vomiting and diarrhea would dehydrate them. With no IV fluids, no way to rehydrate effectively, they'd just weaken and die. But most people just accepted it. I ate something that disagreed with me. Never the meat was rotten. Plates weren't really a thing. You ate off trenchers, thick slices of stale bread that served as both plate and absorbent. The bread would soak up juices and sauces. By the end of the meal, it was soggy. You either ate it, getting all that soaked up grease, or tossed it to the dogs, or it was collected and given to the poor. The table scraps, including the soaked bread people had been eating off, were gathered and distributed as charity. Forks weren't common. You ate with your hands, and a knife, your personal knife that you carried with you. The same knife you used to cut your food was the knife you used to pick your teeth, to clean your nails, to cut thread. You'd wipe it on your clothes between uses, maybe rinse it in a cup of water. No one washed their hands before eating. You'd come straight from wherever you'd been, hawking where you'd handled raw meat and bird droppings, walking through courtyards, and you'd sit down and eat. Hands covered in dirt, dried blood, animal hair, bacteria. You'd pick up meat with your hands, tear it with your teeth, lick your fingers, wipe them on your clothes, pick up more food. Cups and goblets were shared, communal ones passed around. Someone with a cold drinks, then passes it to you. You wipe the rim with your sleeve, just smearing their germs around, and drink. Tudor feasts included stomach-turning dishes, lamprey pie, eels baked in pastry. The eels were often caught in moats, the same moats that guardrobes emptied into. Swan, roasted whole, then refeathered for presentation. The feathers were glued back on with a paste. You'd pull the feathers off to eat the meat underneath. Peacock, same treatment. Roasted, refeathered, displayed. Boar's head, the whole head, roasted, sometimes with an apple in its mouth. Calf's brain. Tripe, stomach lining, chewy, slimy. Everything swam in grease. Heavy animal fat, lard, butter in enormous quantities. Rich women developed chronic digestive issues, gout, kidney stones, gallstones, liver disease, and the drinking. Water was unsafe, so everyone drank alcohol. Starting at breakfast, small beer, low alcohol content but still alcohol. With breakfast, wine. With lunch, more wine. With dinner, ale, mead. By the end of a feast, everyone was at least tipsy. Many were drunk, but it caused its own problems. Chronic alcohol consumption damages the liver, causes weight gain, contributes to gout, worsens dental problems. Tudor royal women were often described as plump, flushed, ruddy-faced, not because they were healthy, because they were eating rich, spoiled food and drinking constantly. They had no concept of nutrition, no understanding of vitamins, so they developed scurvy, vitamin C deficiency. Symptoms include bleeding gums, loosening teeth, easy bruising, anemia, iron deficiency, causing fatigue and weakness, rickets, vitamin D deficiency, causing bone deformities. But they kept eating the same meals, same rich meats, same refined grains, same sugary desserts, same alcohol, because it was all they knew, and when they felt sick from it, they assumed it was God's will. Never the unwashed hands, spoiled meat, or contaminated water. And when they got sick from food or anything else, the cure was often worse than the disease. Feeling unwell. Maybe your stomach hurts, maybe you have a headache, maybe you're just tired. So you call the physician. He arrives with his bag of tools. His plan is simple. He's going to bleed you. Not because you're bleeding internally, not because you're injured, but because your humours are unbalanced. The theory, humoral theory, went like this. Your body contains 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. When they're in balance, you're healthy. When they're out of balance, you're sick. Too much blood, you're sanguine. Solution? Remove some blood. Notice a pattern? No matter what's wrong, the solution involves removing something from your body. For bloodletting, the physician has 2 main methods. Method 1, venesection. He ties a leather strap around your upper arm, making the vein bulge. He selects a vein. Then he takes a lancet, a small sharp blade, and slices into the vein. Blood flows out, drips into a bowl. He watches, waits. When he decides enough has been drained, maybe a cup, maybe a pint, he bandages the wound. No anesthesia. You feel the cut, feel the blood draining, feel yourself getting lightheaded, dizzy, weak, but that's good apparently. Method 2, leeches. He brings out several plump black leeches, places them on your skin, maybe your temple for a headache, your neck for a fever. The leeches latch on. Their mouths have hundreds of tiny teeth. They bite through your skin. Inject an anticoagulant so your blood won't clot. Then they start drinking. You can feel them. A pulling sensation. They swell. Get fatter, darker, engorged with your blood. After 20 minutes or so, they've had their fill. They detach and drop off, leaving wounds that continue bleeding because of the anticoagulant. The physician collects his leeches, rinses them off, puts them back in his jar, to be used on the next patient, and the next. Same leeches, different people. Fantastic. Way to spread disease. Bloodletting was done for everything. Headaches, fever, skin problems, menstrual cramps. Yes, they'd bleed women who were already bleeding. Depression, anxiety, bad dreams, pregnancy complications. When you're sick, your body needs resources to fight the illness. Blood carries oxygen, nutrients, immune cells. Removing blood removes those resources. So bloodletting made you weaker. More susceptible to infection, less able to recover. People got sicker after bloodletting, so the physician would come back and bleed them again, because clearly they still had too much blood. A cycle, a deadly one. But bloodletting wasn't even the strangest medical practice. In Tudor England, urine was considered diagnostic and therapeutic. Physicians would examine your urine, its colour, clarity, smell, to diagnose illness. Dark urine, too much black bile, cloudy urine, infection, sweet-smelling urine. You're probably going to die, but they didn't know why. But urine wasn't just diagnostic, it was treatment. Got a rash? Wash it with urine. Got a cough? Drink your own urine. Got dull skin? Apply aged urine to your face. Not fresh urine, aged urine. Urine that had been sitting in a container for days, fermenting. The urea breaking down into ammonia. Why did they do this? Because it sometimes worked. Ammonia is antibacterial. So washing wounds with aged urine sometimes prevented infection. They didn't understand why, they just knew it helped sometimes. Women would collect their urine in pots, let it sit, use it as skincare, as wound wash, as fabric cleaner. Your face cream was literally aged piss. They also used animal products. Bear grease, fat from bears, was used as moisturizer, rubbed into skin to keep it soft, which sounds fine until you realize that animal fat goes rancid fast, especially without refrigeration. So they were smearing rotten fat on their faces, goose fat, pig fat, all used as skincare, all going rancid, all breeding bacteria. Some women used crushed pearls as exfoliant, literally grinding up expensive pearls and scrubbing their faces. Others used alum, a mineral salt, to tighten pores. It worked, it's an astringent, but it also burned, dried skin, caused irritation, scar or blemish, caustic pastes made from quicklime, sulfur, other corrosive substances, applied to the skin, left on until it burned. The top layer of skin would burn off, blister, peel, and beauty treatments that doubled as torture. Women wore tight masks to bed, leather or fabric masks soaked in egg whites, alum, other skin-tightening substances. They'd sleep with these masks on, all night, breathing restricted, skin pulled taut. The goal? Wrinkle prevention. The result? Skin damage, broken capillaries, poor sleep. Some used mercury masks, mercury mixed into paste, spread over the face, left overnight. The mercury would bleach the skin, make it paler, smoother, for a while, until the mercury started poisoning them. Hair loss, tremors, cognitive decline, personality changes. But beauty was pain, and pain was beauty, so they kept doing it, kept bleeding, kept drinking urine, kept rubbing rotten fat on their faces, in the name of health, in the name of beauty, when really they were just slowly killing themselves. And all that torture couldn't prepare them for the private horrors no one talked about, the maintenance no one mentions, the private hygiene that happened behind closed doors, trimming nails with a small knife, your eating knife probably, carefully shaving off the excess nail, trying not to cut too deep, trying not to slice into the quick. If you do, there's no bandage, no antiseptic, just a cloth pressed against the bleeding. Your fingernails are often dirty, caked with grime under them. The dirt accumulates, packs under the nails, becomes a breeding ground for bacteria. Your toenails, even worse, hidden in shoes that never come off. Tight leather shoes with no ventilation. Your feet are disasters, blisters from rubbing, calluses from pressure, ingrown toenails, fungal infections from the constant moisture. But feet are private, shameful. You don't talk about feet, don't show them, don't ask for help. Now, body hair. In Tudor England, hairlessness was about morality. Body hair was animalistic, sinful, mark of the devil. Women were expected to remove it, all of it. How? Threading, using twisted thread to pull out hairs, plucking with metal tweezers, one hair at a time. Or caustic pastes. The paste method, mix quicklime with water to make a thick paste, apply to the area, wait, feel it burn. The burning sensation is the alkaline paste dissolving the hair and the top layer of your skin. After several minutes, while your skin is on fire, scrape off the paste with a blade. The hair comes off with it, along with skin. The result? Smooth skin. For a few days, then stubble, then irritation, ingrown hairs, infection. Some women just plucked. Hours of sitting with tweezers, pulling out leg hairs one by one, underarm hairs, pubic hairs. Yes, pubic hair removal was expected. The pain was intense, but you couldn't complain, because body hair was shameful. The removal caused problems, cuts, burns, rashes, open sores. Without antibiotics, those cuts got infected, easily. Bacteria entered. Caused boils, painful pus-filled lumps, abscesses, cellulitis. Some women developed chronic pain from scarring, or infertility from infections that spread to reproductive organs, but they couldn't talk about it. couldn't seek help, because their private areas were shameful, secret. Now, vaginal hygiene. Tudor women believed the vagina needed cleansing, purifying, so they douched with wine, with vinegar, with herbal infusions, poured acidic liquids inside themselves. This burned the delicate tissue, disrupted natural pH, killed beneficial bacteria, created the perfect environment for harmful bacteria. Yeast infections were rampant, bacterial vaginosis, UTIs, all caused by douching. And the treatment? More douching, more irritation, more damage, vicious cycle. Some used herbal pessaries, bundles of herbs wrapped in cloth, inserted into the vagina, to cleanse or tighten. The herbs were astringent, drying, painful, and the pessaries weren't sterile, just cloth and herbs, covered in bacteria. Infection spread, scar tissue formed. Some women developed chronic pelvic pain, or infertility, because their attempts at hygiene destroyed them. But they suffered in silence because bodies were shameful, women's bodies especially. So they endured, quietly, painfully, alone. Until eventually, it all ended. And even death wasn't dignified. Dying could be childbed fever, could be plague, could be food poisoning. When someone died, there was no embalming, no preservation. Your body was washed, quickly, with cold water and rose water, then wrapped in a shroud, a simple linen sheet. If you were royal, there was more ceremony. Your body laid out in state, displayed while mourners filed past, but bodies decompose. Fast, within hours, you start to smell. Your skin discolors, becomes greyish, then greenish. Fluids leak from your nose, mouth, other orifices, and everyone just stands there, praying, pretending not to notice. Some royal funerals took days, even weeks, processions from where you died to where you'd be buried, ceremonies, viewings, and your body just rotting, slowly, publicly. They tried to slow it, covered your corpse in herbs. Lavender, rosemary, thyme, burning incense constantly. But it didn't work. The smell broke through, sweet, sickly, putrid. If you died in childbirth, there was an additional indignity. Often you weren't buried immediately. The baby needed to be baptized first, so your body would sit for days, while priests argued over the baby's soul. And when you were finally buried, it wasn't in a sealed casket. Not for most people. It was a wooden box, or just a shroud. Lowered into the ground. The ground was often damp, cold, crawling with worms and insects. Your body would decay quickly, bloat with gases, burst, leak, feed the soil. Within weeks, you'd be unrecognizable. Within months, mostly skeleton. But your grave wasn't private. Churchyards were crowded, bodies buried on top of bodies. Sometimes graves were reused, your bones dug up years later to make room for someone else. So even in death, no dignity, no peace, just more filth, more rot, more indignity. And the living, they moved on, quickly, because death was common, expected, almost routine. Life in Tudor England was brutal from start to finish, and hygiene, or the complete lack of it, was woven through every moment. So there you have it, 11 of the most horrifying, stomach-turning hygiene practices of Tudor royal women. They didn't bathe once every 3 months if they were diligent. They bled into rags that they reused without proper washing. They poisoned their faces with lead and mercury every single day. They relieved themselves into buckets. In the middle of court, they were crawling with lice, fleas and bedbugs. They wore the same filthy chemise for weeks, with no underwear beneath. They gave birth in sealed rooms while midwives with dirty hands introduced fatal infections. They ate spoiled food handled by unwashed servants. They covered their stench with animal secretions instead of bathing. They let physicians drain their blood and told them to drink urine as medicine. They removed body hair with caustic chemicals that burned their skin, and they died slowly, publicly, rotting before they were even buried. And yet they're remembered as icons, queens, symbols of power and grace and beauty, because history forgets the smell, the itch, the pain, the humiliation. It remembers the jewels, the portraits, the gowns, the political intrigue. But now you know the truth. Behind every perfectly painted face was a woman who hadn't washed her hair in a month. Behind every elegant gown was a body covered in bites, rashes, and open sores. Behind every royal smile was a mouthful of blackened, rotting teeth. Behind every moment of grace was constant, grinding physical suffering. Tudor royal women were powerful, brilliant, resilient, strategic. They navigated impossible political situations. They survived assassination plots, religious upheaval, and murderous husbands. But they were also disgusting. By necessity, by circumstance, by a world that didn't know better. So next time you see a portrait of Elizabeth I, pale and perfect and powerful, remember that she was also itching from lice, bleeding into rags, reeking beneath the perfume, her skin rotting from the lead she painted on every morning. And somehow she still ruled an empire for 45 years. Somehow she still intimidated ambassadors and commanded armies. Somehow she still became one of the most successful monarchs in English history. That's the real story. Not the gowns or the jewels or the carefully constructed image, but the sheer, stubborn, extraordinary resilience it took to survive in a body that the world didn't care about, didn't understand, didn't even try to keep clean. Tudor royal women didn't just endure their era, they endured their own bodies. And that, more than any political victory or cultural achievement, is what makes them truly extraordinary. They lived in filth, suffered in silence, smiled through agony, and still changed the world. So tonight, when you climb into your clean bed, with your washed hair and brushed teeth and flush toilet and modern medicine and actual underwear, take a second, just a second, be grateful, because 500 years ago, everything you take for granted was luxury beyond imagining, and you're living it. Sleep well, and maybe shower in the morning, maybe twice, just because you can.